Gary DePaul with Unlabeled Leadership. Welcome to episode 45. Randy McNeely helps build culture. Here's a shout out to listeners in the Netherlands and in Costa Rica, and who are in Provincia de San Jose. With that, let's get started. Elaine Jacques introduced me to Randy McNeely, and Randy is the first Chief Kindness Officer I've met. In fact, I never heard of that title until I met him, and believe me, he is all about kindness. So much so that he has a podcast entitled The Kindness and Happiness Connection, and he has a book entitled The Kindness Giver's Formula. He also has a service offering called CultureWise, which you can find on his Peacock Institute website. If I was to be more accurate, though, I should describe CultureWise as an end-to-end operating system for culture. And what Randy does is he helps companies use this operating system to deliberately and intentionally drive and grow their culture. Part 1, When Pretty Neat Can Change Everything. Let's face it, in today's society, it's very easy to develop a low self-esteem. We think little of ourselves, our contributions, and just in general, our abilities to do things. However, even when we get trapped in this type of thinking and we're in this downward spiral, it doesn't take a lot of effort to change that trajectory. In leadership, there's a principle that's called believe in others. When we're able to live by that principle, we can help people change the way they view themselves and view their role in the world. In this story, Randy shares with us how someone helped him by just saying a few words. Here's Randy with the story.
I was a teenager. Our family was going through a really very challenging time. My father had made some serious mistakes, ended up being prosecuted. It was a small town, so it was all over the newspapers, on the news, etc. And it was really embarrassing. And because of what had happened, in some ways I blame myself for my father being in the situation he was, as ridiculous as that sounds. I was blaming myself. And so I didn't have very good self-esteem. In fact, I had next to no self-esteem. I had been elected to be part of the student council. I wasn't an officer, but I was just a part of the council. I was representative for our class at the junior high school I went to, and they were going to have a meeting. Yeah, they're going to have a meeting, and the student body president asked me to type up the agenda for the meeting. I went and did that. I took care of my assignment. I got to the classroom early where we were going to have our meeting, and I laid out all the agendas. And I was there just by myself. And then a good friend of mine, whom I'll call Michelle, came in. She was a cheerleader. She was popular. She was pretty. She was vivacious, meaning she was very outgoing and friendly and fun. She comes she almost bounced when she walked into a room. I mean, she was so enthusiastic, and she walked in, she says hi, and she picked up one of the agendas and she looked at it. She stared at it for a second and she goes, "Oh, did you realize you misspelled the word miscellaneous?" And I was embarrassed. I probably turned 50 shades of red. My answer to her is perfectly explanatory of how I felt about myself at the time. It was very direct and blunt. "Oh, I guess you think I'm pretty stupid, huh?" I said it in that same tone.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, that how she responded has impacted me for 36 years since then. Her response, without missing a beat, was, "Oh, no, I don't. I think you're pretty neat." And I can't tell you, I still get choked up when I think about that, because two things. At the time, I had no idea how badly I needed to hear somebody say that. I needed someone to say that. And I honestly had to go walk out of the room. I walked out of the room and then I ran. I ran to the bathroom. I opened a stall. I shut the stall and locked the door. I sat there and cried. because I felt so lousy about myself, and to think that someone as neat as I thought Michelle, I thought Michelle was just, man, she's just one of those kind of people that everybody wants to be around or be like. And at that time, it was for me, it was a way for God telling me that I was okay, and He used her as an instrument to do that. I firmly believe that, and I've never forgotten that. That story has not only impacted me, but it's, I've shared it with hundreds and with thousands of people, and it's also included in my book, The Kindness Giver's Formula, as an example of how a simple sentence can impact somebody and ripple through time for years.
I think a lot of people are going to relate to your story. And I know that they do because just what you said, it's so real and affects so many people in a similar way. When she made the comment that, oh, you misspelled miscellaneous, by the way, I misspelled miscellaneous too several times. And she was saying, oh, you made a mistake. It's a behavioral mistake. You didn't intend it. But at the same time, when she replied, oh, no, I don't. I think you're pretty neat. She's saying that I believe in you as a person. I think you're a good person, but the behavior, just the behavior, misspelling a word doesn't define who you are or what you're doing. The powerful part of that, it says that we need to express that we do believe in other people and who they are and what they represent. And we just don't hear that enough.
Well, and it's an interesting thing because you're exactly right. We don't hear that enough. You hear all these things about leadership and what it takes to be a good leader. And from a culture perspective, you talk to leaders and say, well, how vital is culture to your company? How vital are these behaviors, such as being honest with people, listening generously, not blaming, but just taking care of problems, et cetera. You ask them about that, how vital they are, and they say, oh man, they're absolutely vital. And then you ask them the follow-on question, okay, do you have a strategic plan in place for designing your culture? And almost all of them will say no.
Or they say, what? A what?
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
The story I shared with you is just common decency, common kindness. I'm not sharing any principles that are new, but it's interesting how many people just kind of take them for granted or see kindness as a type of weakness almost. And it's an interesting phenomenon when in fact it's just the opposite. Kindness is the foundation of building strong and firm relationships. You can't do that without being able to connect to people's hearts, and connection's the keystone of success, and the key ingredient for connection is kindness.
I identified 7 leadership principles, and one of them is believe in others. I never thought about from a perspective of a culture. When you ask professionals, do you have a strategic plan? In other words, you're asking, do you let your culture develop on its own, or do you try to influence your culture with a plan? If you asked me to do a plan, I would want to try to incorporate some of those principles into that plan. And even what you represent also is not just believing in people, but the kindness that you want your culture to have, and don't leave it up to chance.
Exactly. How many of us talk about wanting to be healthy and then just kind of leave that up to chance? We all do to a certain degree, unless we're intentionally making a plan to be healthy. Part of that includes identifying triggers and things that drive us towards doing things that we know are unhealthy. And the only reason I bring that up is because it really in life, if we're going to be able to accomplish things, it takes intentional planning to do it. Some things just happen by chance. There are things that happen during the day that you don't expect. But if you're constantly looking for opportunities to do good things and to make good things happen, even when random opportunities come up, you can act on them.
I haven't thought about it that way. And I almost want to say intentional planning is a way that you can overcome or mitigate triggers or bad habits.
It is. It really is. I'm listening to The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg.
Duhigg, exactly. A beautiful book.
It is. It's fantastic. When he talks about, we all have cues, we have routines, we have cues, routines, something, and cravings. Oh, rewards. Those things all play a role in habits. And the other thing is belief. He talks about some great principles in there. when we intentionally plan, we can directly affect our habits and the things that we're doing. And we can change old habits, bad habits, we can turn them into good habits, or we can just, we can replace them with good habits, if that makes sense.
And do that individually or as a group.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's, how we got to hear from telling my story. It's interesting. I'm not sure how we did that, but it's a great conversation.
Part 2, Conversations that leave you uplifted. Storytelling is a powerful way to influence others. When told in the right way, at the right time, with the right circumstances, a story can have a rippling effect through time for years to come. Stories can even change our attitudes and the way we behave, especially if they're remarkable and memorable. Randy has several stories, but this one stood out and he wanted to share with you that experience and how it affected him. Here's Randy.
When I was in college, I was dating a girl, and I'll just call her Julie.
Okay.
She was a farm girl. I mean, her father was a cattle rancher. He had a big dairy farm and cattle. I guess you couldn't call him a rancher. He was a dairy farmer. That's a better way to describe it. He, had a business where he traveled all over the state of Utah and sold bulls and cattle and bull semen and things like that. He bred his cattle. He bred bulls and other things. And he was an amazing man. They had, this is going to sound insane. They had 17 children. 17. That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids.
A lot of kids. But he was one of the hardest working men I have ever seen. And yet he was down to earth, easygoing, matter of fact, no nonsense kind of guy. He called me into into the barn one day. He says, "My daughter has some pretty strong feelings for you, and I just want to give you a little bit of advice." And I said, "Okay." And I'm sitting here thinking, "Oh,
you don't know. Whoa.
Don't know what's going to come." But he said, "I want to just share a story with you." And he says, "I have a friend whose name, is, I'll call John, because I don't remember what he told me his name was, but I'll just call him John." He says, "I have a friend named John who is a quadriplegic. He's paralyzed from the neck down. He's in a wheelchair. He's got rods that have to brace up his neck and his head. He's in a brace all the time. And he's got screws in the back of his head that hold his head in place." Under those circumstances, you would think that he would be, that'd be pretty rough existence. He says, "But let me tell you about John. John is one of the happiest people I have ever met. Despite his circumstances, he doesn't let his circumstances control his attitude. Anyone who sees him, if they ask John how he's doing, his answer is always the same. He says, every day is a holiday and every meal's a feast."
Nice.
And that's the attitude he brings to life. He's cheerful, he's kind, he's gentle, he's loving, and he treats people, like they're important. And people love to go and visit John and talk with John because they always come away feeling lifted up and feeling like, if John and his challenging circumstances can be that cheerful, heck, I have nothing to complain about. I can be cheerful all the time too.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't remember why he wanted to share that with me. My girlfriend and I may have had a little bit of a dispute, a spat or something. I can't, and I had not been so kind. I honestly don't remember. I'll never forget that story because it really impacted my heart. And he basically just said to me, he says, "If you remember that and strive to be cheerful and to be like John, it'll take you a long way in life." As I think back on that story, I wish I had taken it to heart better because I haven't been perfect at being kind. Of course, nobody is. And I've had to practice a lot to change some of my own attitudes and wants and desires to become kinder and to get to a point where I feel like I'm comfortable being called the Chief Kindness Officer and other things like that. But his advice has been a blessing to my life because it helps me when I, just like anybody else, we all get discouraged, especially, I mean, this last year has been rough for everybody. But I think of that story and it helps me remember, as long as I'm above ground and walking and able to be seen, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm doing pretty good.
You're taken into the barn. You don't know what he's going to say. And then he tells you the story about John and shares with you a perspective of life. This is a beautiful way of modeling what we could be doing to helping other people.
Well, and it's interesting. It's a great leadership principle. You treat people like human beings and you bring out the best in them. I think that's really what he was trying to share with me, because that's the way John treated everybody. He didn't care if somebody was black, purple, pink, or green, or what color their hair was, or if they were fat, skinny, Christian or non-Christian, whatever. He treated everybody with kindness and love. A strong leadership principle, when you can see your employees as human beings and recognize the fact that just because they've crossed the threshold into your building, or, in this case, or, if they, just because they're working for you, they come onto a Zoom meeting and they're all of a sudden at work, so to speak, that doesn't mean that there's some magic box where they dump their human needs. If anything, the pandemic has taught us, coming onto this virtual world, we're having meetings all the time, that lesson has been pounded home.
You know how companies have vision statements and mission statements, and then they have their values, list of values. Yeah. I would love to see a company just treat people like human beings as one of their guiding principles. I think that would be fantastic. Maybe it's because I don't know a lot of companies, but I have not heard any company that's done that.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, and because and I'll just make this brief, I work with a great company called CultureWise. They have a product, a method called CultureWise. The company is High Performing Culture, that teaches organizations to do just that. We help organizations identify the fundamental behaviors that they want to have in their culture. We help them develop a plan, and we have an app to help them operationalize that culture and those principles so that they can ingrain them in everybody in the organization. And if you're going to, and they become known by that. And they've helped over 500 companies do that now.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's not just having the vision, the guiding principles, but it sounds like you and your company has an incredible way of actualizing and developing tactics to be able to do that, actualize that outcome.
Yeah, we help them identify those fundamental behaviors and then actualize them through rituals or habits, if you will. For example, listen generously. Well, okay, what's the ritual you can do around that? You can practice every time you have a meeting or something like that. Take 5 minutes, talk about that principle, and talk about what action you can do if you're in a meeting, if you're in sales or whatever. Develop rituals around that practice and do that, repeatedly. And they identify the behaviors, and it goes through a cycle. Each behavior is practiced. One behavior is practiced every week, and it's practiced that entire week, and then the next one, and then the next one. So it's not only are they identifying the behaviors, but they're continually practicing them so that as a way to really get it ingrained. Just like, when you practice the piano, it's a little bit awkward at first, but the more you practice it, the better you get.
Which is so much better than just leaving it to chance.
Exactly. If we say we want to do something and then we're just kind of leaving it to chance, then it's never going to happen.
Yep, that workout program will never it will never happen if it's not planned.
If we could work out by osmosis, we'd all be skinny.
Part 3, from priorities to action. Much of what we do, the choices we make, the way we act around other people, are driven by our beliefs and even our guiding principles. Likewise, our beliefs and principles can shape our habits, both good habits and bad habits. It's around this concept that Randy shares with us some advice that he's learned over the years and from some pretty impressive people. Here's Randy to explain.
I love quotes. I have a couple of quotes up that go along with that last story I shared. The first one is by a good man named Marvin J. Ashton. He's a former leader of the church I go to. And this quote is, "The attitude with which we approach each day controls the outcome." And it goes right along with John's statement, every day's a holiday and every meal's a feast. We can determine the outcome of our day by the way that we approach it. Another quote that goes right along with that is by another man named by the name of Dallin H. Oaks, former Supreme Court Justice for Utah and lawyer, and now a leader in my church. It says this, it says, "Desires dictate our priorities. Priorities shape our choices, and choices determine our actions. The desires we act on determine our changing and achieving and our becoming." And it goes along with kind of the story John shared, every day's a holiday, every meal's a feast. What we desire, he desired to be cheerful and to have a positive impact, and he acted on those desires. It also works, goes along with culture-wise. If you desire to have a good culture, you identify the behaviors that you want to have, and you act on those behaviors. You form rituals, habits around those behaviors so that they become an ingrained part of your company. And you can do the same thing with your life. You identify the behaviors you want to have in your life, practice those behaviors, and identify habits around them and practice those habits, and you'll become the person you want to become.
A plan without habits is, I don't know, not a good plan.
I'll put it this way, useful knowledge unapplied is worthless. It doesn't help you. It's just education. It won't help you at all if you don't apply it.
My thanks to Randy McNeely. If you'd like to learn more about Randy, go to the show notes. And if you have a comment or question, go to unlabelleadership.com, click the message icon, and you can leave a voicemail up to 1 minute. I'd like to thank those who have supported the show. Your contributions helps with the production cost. Most importantly, though, I'd like to thank you for listening. Until next time, lead on.